It has got to be a bit fun though, hasn't it? It has got to be a bit of a laugh.
Yeah, I mean, we did some pantos with the same group as well, and they were really fun because it was just a complete mess around. And I'd never done pantos before, and it was just mayhem and chaos all the time. So that's when we could have fun. And then the musicals were very sort of straightforward. This is how we're doing it.
Because as you say, you're very, very talented, and well, you haven't said you're very, very talented, but I think Jane and I and those of us who know you would say this, that you're a very talented singer, you're a very talented dancer. You're always the one. You and one or two others, Vanessa and so on, are those to whom our directors turn to say, "How should this be moved, George? How should this be sung?" You know, if Amanda's daughter's not there, then that happens, doesn't it?
I have found that I've gained a bit of a reputation of, if someone needs someone quickly, I'm the one they give a call. I'm normally at least one, two, or three on the list of, Georgie might be free. Georgie might be able to do it. I've had a few shows pre-lockdown a couple of years before that where they were like, someone's dropped out. We need someone. Who can we rely on? And that's really nice. But at the same time, it doesn't give me much rehearsal time. So sometimes I feel like I'm rushing through things, trying to get prepared for a role. Sometimes it's really, really nice, but also a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, isn't it? It's a good overwhelm, though, isn't it? Do you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because I feel like sometimes part of the thing I love about theatre is the rush. Like, oh gosh, like if this doesn't go right, oh god, so it's very adrenaline-y. So I kind of got used to that adrenaline rush.
It's very exciting, isn't it? It's very, 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 very exciting. But of course, you don't do this full time, do you? But what you've just described feels like full time, really.
Yeah, sometimes it does feel like I would prioritize line learning over maybe doing some actual work that I get paid for. Or I'll be listening to my lines, like I record them and then play them back. So I'll be listening to my lines whilst I'm just typing away at work. So sometimes I do feel like it's kind of becoming a full-time job, even though I'm not necessarily being paid for it. So it can seem a bit naughty.
Yes, I
don't tell any of my bosses this.
No, well, as I say, only 3 people ever listen to this, and they're all here. You, me, and Jane are probably the only people who will ever hear this. So, so have no fear. Yeah, it is interesting how we remember how it is interesting how the very first things you've both mentioned, the things you were first in, they stick in our minds, don't we? Those things that we do as children, they really, really, really do stay in our minds. And Amanda, just as that gives me an opportunity to name check Amanda a bit, and she's been on this thing as well. It's been amazing doing these podcasts, actually, because the things that I've learned about people's fascinating lives has been amazing. But Amanda has been so critical, hasn't she? There must be hundreds of people who look back at what happened, at their work with Amanda, and think, wow, I owe so much to her. I mean, talking about gratitude and debt and so on. Virtually every young person I know and have acted with at Second Thoughts has at some time or another been in Rogues and Vagabonds or whatever. I don't think that's been over exaggerated, is it?
No, I think she's done a lot for me personally, because she's the reason I joined Second Thoughts. She sort of said, there's a role in a play I'm directing. I was one of the older members at the time, and she needs someone sort of, I think I was 16, maybe 15 or 16, so she needed someone of my age. So there was me and someone else who got asked to do it, and we just got pulled in, and then that was it. I was stuck. I've not left since, apart from my 3 years at uni. So I owe a lot to her, because none of this would have happened if I wasn't there. And obviously I'd been with them since I think I was about 13 or 14 when I first joined. So no, that's a long, like, all the training that I had, and most of the choreography was Amy, or there was another choreographer we had. So I owe a lot to Amy as well, because most of my dance skills I learned from her.
We all do, don't we? Amy's an absolute. Amy's going to come on this as well. She agreed, although she may have forgotten that she agreed, but I won't let her forget. But she's done a lot of acting on being very good to all of us, hasn't she? Really, Amy, very extraordinarily. Generosity actually is a theme, isn't it? Really. It is a real theme in terms of what we do. But before I come back to that, I said we'd come back to something Jane mentioned earlier as well, and I will. But time is gabbling on, and I'm gabbling on. What I wanted to say though was let's just for a moment do the thing about because people have got different people in our as it were, amateur world, a word I particularly dislike, being the pretentious arty fart that I am. I personally prefer the word public to amateur. Public theatre, I think, has a better resonance. There's the word amateur. I don't know what either of you think of this, whether this is overthinking it, but the word amateur has just become associated with things not being very good. It's very cruel, that, isn't it? How a word that means, to love something has become just in ordinary chit chat. Oh, that's so amateurish, which means poor. And that's real shame. It's a real shame, I think. So I got this personal thing that is public theatre. It's people getting up and, because we all know the quality of what sometimes we see in the amateur stage is phenomenal. But neither of you chose to make this a profession, or you did. Let's go to Jane on that one first. Jane, did you ever think you might like to earn your corn doing this?
I think very early on it sounded exciting, and my father sort of said, "No, you've got to do something sensible." And then I probably had another opportunity much later on, and something stopped me. And I wonder whether it was just because my motivation wasn't quite strong enough for whatever reason.
Now my daughter has just come in. I can cut this out if my daughter doesn't want to appear. Hello, my darling. How can I help? It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. What would you do? Do you need something, my dear? Yes, of course. Are you going to go for a walk, or are you just going out? All right. Yeah. Yeah. No problem. Yes, of course you can. Yeah. Yeah. No, don't worry at all. Don't worry at all. It's real life. And this podcast is about real life, but I won't include this bit in it because I'm not sure. You're under 16, so you can't really be kind of thrust into international stardom. Bless her cotton socks. So for one reason or another, it didn't. You say not. You didn't feel sufficiently motivated, which is very, very interesting, isn't it? Because you describe the way in which so much of your life has been dominated by theatre and performance of one sort or another.
Yes, I'm not sure I can explain why. I think we probably just know, is the energy there to sustain it? And sometimes it isn't, and you can't explain why. Or you could give an explanation, but it probably isn't the real reason.
Oh, interesting. And Georgie, you're young enough, of course, for not Jane and I aren't, but do you think sometimes that you would like to do this for life as a corn earning prospect?
Well, I did try. When I finished uni, I had a couple of years where I was working and earning money, and I was like full time, sort of 9 to 5 job, and then I think it was back in 2016, I got the chance to go perform at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And I kind of took that as my first opportunity. I was like, right, if this is going to work, this is an opportunity to try. So I sent out letters, emails, headshots to agents, casting people everywhere. And I think I probably sent about 100 emails, sort of 20 or 30 letters. And one agent turned up at the Edinburgh Fringe, which, to be fair, I understand, it's in Edinburgh, but some of them did say, we are looking, our books are open. And that agent eventually said no. And I think that was a bit of a knock for me, because I thought, if I'm sending out putting all this time in and I'm not getting as much back, is it worth the energy at the time when I'm also working full time? And I was doing 2 or 3 shows at the same time as that. So my days were taken up with work, and my evenings were taken up with rehearsals. So I kind of thought at the time, this isn't the right time. So, and also I'm not, unsurprisingly, I'm not a very resilient person. Like, I can take a bit of rejection here and there, but the constant 100 emails and 1 email back was quite a knock. So I haven't ruled it out completely. Like I'm still doing singing, and I'm trying to do professional things, but I don't think at the moment it's the right time to go full speed ahead on the thing again. I think the time will present itself if it's something I can do. I mean, David Bradley, president of Second Thoughts, he didn't get into professional acting till sort of late 30s. So I don't think there's a time limit on it. I might get to my 40s and they're like, actually, you're exactly what we need. I think the fortunate thing is as well that there are obviously times in people's lives where other things take priorities. People might go off have families, they might have to retire because they haven't got enough funds or things like that. So that might be the time where I'm like, actually, this is it. This is a good time for me. So I haven't ruled it out, but also I'm not setting my hopes on it. I think if it happens, it happens. But I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing at the moment, doing bits here and there, and it's more of a side hustle than an actual full-time job.
Very interesting. And now I better take us into a slightly different area now, which is different yet related. What shows have you? We'll talk about the future in the final bit of this, which is rapidly hoving into view. But what shows have you done that you have very, very fond memories of, and you think, gosh, I'd love to do that again, or a part that you've played where you thought, I'd like to play that. I'd like to do that again. Or is there a part but you both think, I'd love to play that one day, or a show that you think, gosh, I wish we could do that. That kind of is wrapping two things up in one. But let us come to Jane for that first. What shows stick in your mind, as well as the Brown Bear, which will now stick in everybody's mind, quite rightly. What shows do you find yourself thinking, wow, that was a great experience?
I think the ones that I've enjoyed over the years have been the comedy parts, and they've been the parts where I've just felt completely at one with the character. And the one that always comes to mind is Don't Dress for Dinner, which is a farce, which I did in Singapore. It was a fabulous part in terms of being cast and worked brilliantly, but we had a very creative director and we had a cast. One of the lead men just happened to have brought his wife along for the audition, never acted in his life. He was a doctor, an Indian doctor from India. And they were so short of men. The director said, have you ever acted? He said, no. He said, read this. He said, you've got the part. And this guy, it was just the most amazing, but he came to it with this wonderful, clear, pure, non-ego, and it just made it such a beautiful, and he was terrified of sort of touching me physically because at farce, there was a lot of sort of slap and tickle. That it made it even funnier. So on two levels, the cast got on well. It was creative, strong bond, and a very good script, and cast well. And I think I can count on one hand where you have the luxury in amateur theatre for all that to come together. We did Allo Allo as well, which I acted in and loved, which was just a guinea a minute from the start. I mean, it's just hilarious. Again, out in Singapore, and Whisking Eggs here was good fun. And I think one of the things I particularly liked about Whisking Eggs was that we were able to refine it because we did it over a length of time. We did it twice, and there's something about coming back to a play once you've had a chance to get to know it really well, drop it, and then come back to it, where you can put much more into it.
I only saw you in one of those, obviously, because I've never been. The closest I've been to Singapore is an Atlas. So, but I saw you in Whisking Eggs, which allows us to name check another of our friends, Jackie Lines, who is a genius, who's been on this as well. Genius, friend of the show, get me. chit chat over Zoom, and but yeah, Jackie's a genius, is she not? Not only in theatre, but in terms of, well, generally how she improves people's lives in one way or another, really. But you were terrific in that, and it was, if I might say, Jane, it was quite a saucy play.
Great fun, yes.
It was great. It was great fun. Yes. And what about? Have you? You don't have to disclose any of this, because people sometimes don't wish to for a very good reason. I, for example, wouldn't dream of mentioning that one day I should like to play Macbeth. But there we are. I've said it. And King Lear. I think I'm sure that will come along. That's partly why I did ZTE, so that I could cast myself in things that I'll never get cast in, if we're talking honestly. But Jane, are there parts that you think, gosh, I'd love to do that one day?
I just think some comedy. I think I really enjoy comedy. It's something about the timing. I wouldn't pinpoint a particular role. Interaction, making people laugh, hearing people laugh, to get that sense of oneness that you get when, you all erupt in a sort of sense of yay, laughing at life, taking life lightly. Seems to me just so enjoyable.
Yes. And that, I venture to suggest, that getting that sense of laughter in the audience, I think that's one of the hardest things there is. Isn't it, really? That's why I don't do it, a lot of it, because it's too hard. If you're doing a tragic part, you got a fair chance, you got a 50-50 bet it's going to be you're being successful if you hear nothing. But if you're doing comedy, it's got to be a laugh or it's dead.
Yes, a good script helps, doesn't it?
Well, it does help.
Makes a big difference, yeah.
But it's no guarantee, is it? I mean, you've never had this experience, Jane, where you've told a funny line and no one's laughed.
You certainly have.
Have you? I don't remember. I've never seen you. Your sense of timing is superb, isn't it, Georgie? Jane's comic timing. I only say that because it allows me once again to mention Chorus of Disapproval, which I think is on my wall behind me. So there it is, directly above my bold little head. None of you are in those pictures, though. But
it was good fun, that one.
That was, wasn't it? That was. And you got a lot of laughs in that, Jane, didn't you? Now then, so Georgie, over to you. What shows do you remember with particular fondness? And is there a part you'd like to play?
There are a few that stick in my brain when someone says, what's been your favourite thing? Going to Edinburgh Fringe and doing Rent for a month, the musical, was crazy. Not just because during the evenings we were performing and we had two casts. So one night I would be one role, one night would be another role. I played Joanne and then a member of the chorus on the other night. So not only that, but during the day we would be on the mile performing, leafleting, talking to people, and people would come up to us and say, I've seen Rent, this many times, it's one of my favorite shows. And hearing the experiences really kind of brings it home. And being in Edinburgh as well was just, so that whole month of my life was just, it stuck in my brain. I also really, really enjoyed doing Lilies on the Land with the Bear Pit a few years ago. Not just because the cast was incredible, it was all women talking about these real stories from real people, but also our director Lindsay was just, I love working with her because what she kind of gives to a group, she'll kind of come in and say, right, we're going to do this, and then by the time you finish the rehearsal, the end product is completely different to what you started with, and you feel like you've accomplished something at every rehearsal. I used to go home and just fall asleep. I'd be so tired from all of the energy that she'd kind of be getting out of us. And that was incredible. And we got to meet real land girls as well, and they came to see the show. So that was quite personal. It was like, this is real. This is not just a play. This is real stories that we're telling. And we kind of revisited that a couple of times afterwards as well.
That was hugely successful, wasn't it? That a lot of people have got very fond memories of that piece.
Yeah, and Lindsay's kind of vision for it. We're on stage the entire time. We had the Landgirl uniforms on. We had the songs from the 40s, from the war, and I mean, it was really emotional for me hearing that this is what people did day to day. I used to think, they just worked on the farms, but there was a lot going on, and they were really dealing with a lot of issues as well as just working on the farm. We used to call them the forgotten army because people just forgot they existed. So being involved in that has definitely given me a different perspective on a lot of things. Yeah, and I mean, it was just a great experience with the whole team as well, with the whole cast.
And are there parts that you think, cool, one day?
So many. I'd love to play either a big Shakespearean heroine. I played Helena just before lockdown in 2020.
You did, and you were jolly good, wasn't she, Jane?
It was. That's one of the parts that I've always
Jane's
wanted.
Nodding, listeners.
Sorry,
Jane's
yes,
nodding.
Yes, you can't see me nodding.
And nod doesn't work ever so well on the radio, Jane. If I give you that note, if I give you that note.
But she's one of the heroines that I've always been kind of drawn to because she's often overlooked and she's not really given much time. And I think actually she's the reason a lot of that play happened the way it did. So she was one of my favorites. But I'd love to play another one, like maybe one of the girls in As You Like It, or in Twelfth Night. But also I'm a bit, I'd love to play a Shakespearean hero. Maybe I'd like to play Hamlet. I don't know. I just love Shakespeare. Shakespeare's one of those things that I just love getting my teeth into and discovering. But then there are a lot of roles in musicals that I'd love to get my teeth into as well. So there's a lot on the list. I don't think we've got time to go through them all. Well,
now partly this is a selfish reason I'm asking you both this is because like I was kind of semi-joking about the Zoom theatre stuff that I do. It'd be lovely to have you two involved in that in some respect. And what I say to people generally is, if there's a part you'd like to play or a speech from a part you'd like to do, at least then so please consider this a public recorded invitation, either separately or together. Actually. Separately or together. Funny, there's not many jokes in Hamlet, but there are jokes, Jane. There are jokes. You'd be a lovely Hamlet, actually, Georgie. Yes, Hamlet and Gertrude. Yeah. Jane, you see, you and Jane would be you could be yes, very, very interesting. And neither of you are taking that bait, so
I was twiddling my fingers. I was getting ready.
Yes. But if there are other, what I'm really keen to get into with this Zoom stuff is not only parts that people have always wanted to play, but also plays that don't, out of copyright pieces that because we can't do copyright pieces because we haven't got any money. That haven't seen the light, or writers that don't that will almost never get to the stage. Particularly, this is just my own personal thing. I'm really, really into Jacobean and Elizabethan writers who no one's ever heard of, and Jacobean and Elizabethan poetry that doesn't get a big audience. Not that we get a big audience, but again, sometimes it's double figures. Sometimes as many as double figures, but anyway, yes. And see, Jane, you'd be very good at talking about comedy. You'd be very good in a Sheridan role. I think you'd love a Sheridan role, wouldn't you? School for Scandal or something, or Lydia Lavish. Mrs. Malaprop. Now, Jane, there is a part, if ever there was a part written for you.
Yes, I played that once.
Have you?
I auditioned for Lucy in the same play and sat in the wrong place and was given the lead and thought, it was frightfully sort of pleased with myself until I started to learn the words. And of course, because of the malapropisms, it was a bloody nightmare. But it was great fun.
Well, listener, if you'd like to see Jane and Georgie on Zoom Theatre, do drop a comment in the comments below. Now, Rachel Alcock always puts a comment in the comments below. So if you're watching, Rachel, you know, tell Jane and Georgie that they should be, because Rachel's done it. I think she's done it twice. Well, you've done it, Jane, haven't you? Under the guise of in Courier, you.
Yes, of course, yes.
That's had about 120 views now. That the Courier, which is in our world is pretty darn good. That's a whole house at the Bear Pit. And in terms of Edinburgh, Georgie, you know, and that's a Titanic audience. Well, I say Titanic, I don't mean sinking sense. So we're now, the sands of time are drawing to a close. The lights are dimming. The audience are rustling. Rachel's thinking, how much longer is he going to go on? Blimey. Rachel's a friend of the show. Not only has she been, I haven't interviewed her actually, so must get her on this as well. So she's or everyone. Yeah, the land army's there, Georgia. That proves the point, doesn't it? Think about, you know, plays about lives that theoretically on the surface you would think, well, that's going to be reasonably unremarkable, but actually, absolutely the reverse.
Mm-hmm. And then with the stories that they would tell, you know, of American soldiers and Italian prisoners of war, and it almost seemed like they were kind of separate on this farm, just, you know, working away, and then all of a sudden, this American group would appear, and they'd appear at the dances, and they would then tell stories. Almost unreal.
Popular theatre, but there's a term for it, isn't it? I forget what it is. Vox pop theatre or something like that. Theatre based on actual people's lives,
like a documentary or a verbatim piece.
Yes. So interesting, because most people lead lives that they themselves don't regard as terribly remarkable, but it's only because you're in that world. But to other people, it's astonishing what people can overcome, what people have overcome. Sorry, this is turning into a monologue. So let us finish with this. We finish with this. If you were to say to somebody who was thinking about getting into theatre, and there might be post-lockdown, people might be thinking, always fancy getting into theatre in some regard. What are the greatest joys? It brings us right back to your first thought, your first response, actually, Jane, about you were talking about the kind of the sort of peace almost that the theatre can bring. But what is it that because there are lots and lots of groups in Stratford and so on. What are the things that are most attractive about being in a theatrical show in some regard, front or backstage? Because I know you both do. You both do everything. Let's go to Jane for this first. This is your final answer. You can phone a friend if you wish. I can't phone a friend because I haven't got one. Jane.
I think it's being part of something that's bigger than yourself. And I think if you can, I think theatre forces you at certain times, if it's going to work, to drop all your ego. But there's a huge amount of ego in it as well, which is why it's incredibly painful and frightening. And so it's one of those alive moments, like skiing down a slope or climbing a rock face or something where you're right in the face of the headlights. And you there's no space to think. You can just be. You just are. And when we are in that space, we are bigger than ourselves. Something within us, I think, comes to the fore. And that, for me, is what theatre's brought. But it's equally, just one quick story. I remember when, in fact, it was The Rivals, when I was doing Mrs. Malaprop. And I hadn't really sort of mentally been back in the theatre long enough. And just before the show, I experienced incredible terror. And I remember going down, in this particular theatre, you could go under the stage. And I knew under the stage, there wouldn't be anyone else. All the rest of the cast were out doing other things. And I sat under the stage and I thought, I can't do this. I just can't do it. I was terrified. And suddenly the voice came to me, you're not doing it for you. You know, if you focus so much on you, if you mess it up, you mess it up for everyone who's put all the work into it. And something made me go out there and do it for something bigger than myself. Then it worked. That came to me. Wow. I don't know where it came from, but it's what took the terror away. And I think that captures theatre. It puts us in the spotlight as people. And that's a very rich, frightening but fulfilling place to be.
Is it not? Is it not? Absolutely is. And just to tell a lesser story than yours, but it's jumped into my head when you told that one. When I was in Body Double at the Bear Pit some while ago now, actually, written by the genius Mark Carey, and in that I had to I played two parts, and one of them was corpse, which I'm particularly good at, actually. And I was killed and had to drop through a hole in the stage to underneath the stage in the Bear Pit. The stage was built up, and you to create this space under it. So down I went, but I'm afraid I had rather less impressive experience than yours, Jane, because I thought to myself, because I had another 2 or 3 scenes after that. So I dropped down under the stage and then thought, I actually can't get out. so it's not a case of I am paralyzed with terror, which I am all the time on the stage, I have to say. But I couldn't find my way out. There was a hole that led into the scenery dock at the back, and I couldn't find it.
So one of those bad dreams.
Yes, it really was. It was really, and no one could say, this way, Graham, because so I think it was a really cunning plan of Mark that I would never be seen again. However, I did emerge, but no, it was quite a Georgie, what is it about theatre that you think? It's not a job interview, this. I'm so sorry. Your very best qualities. What's the excitement of it? Because it is the best thing in the world, I think.
I think it's for me, I just enjoy being there, like Jane said, being and not being anything. Like, I think that one of the hardest lessons I had to learn as an actor is that you can't act. If you're acting, you're not there. You just are. I think learning that lesson, once you kind of know that, you can take the character where it goes, because it'll take you. You'll just know. And I think that kind of thrill of, what if the scenery falls down? What if you fall over? Because I've had it before where I've had to wear character shoes on stage, and I'm not used to walking in heels very often. And the floor was particularly slippy that day, and I almost went straight down on the floor. And the thrill of anything could happen on that stage. And I don't just mean bad things, I mean good things. You could feel something that you've not felt before, and the audience could just roar with laughter, or absolutely on their feet, standing ovation. It's the not knowing. I mean, normally I'm like, oh yeah, I need to know exactly what's going on stage. You know, where's my costume, where's my shoes? But if you just kind of think it'll happen, it'll fall into place, and then you're just there, then there's just no feeling like it. And I remember there've been a few times when I've stood on stage after a particularly strong, like I did Made in Dagenham a few years ago.
Why? Of course, yes, with Richard.
Yes, and standing on that stage at the end when we've told the story of these women, and just seeing the audience on their feet every night. You just feel like you've told a story, and people know now, because essentially we are just storytellers. And I'd much prefer doing theatre that's, not that I don't enjoy theatre that's not necessarily real, but like a real story that's not really told very often, and we have that incredible opportunity to tell the story and change people's lives. It's just so fulfilling.
Wow. I'm going to finish it there because they're both beautiful responses. So let me just say that first of all, I will have a little thing on the podcast to celebrate the fact that we are in fact back in the theatre. And are either of you in the One Act Play Festival thing at the Bear Pit?
I'm directing, but
Are you indeed? What are you directing, Jane?
Oh, a 25-minute version of Happy Talk.
Angela's play. Yes. So that's and then Amanda's piece in August, of course. Yes. The Shakespeare Review. Jane, thank you very much for submitting yourself to this experience. Georgie, thank you very much, and thank you both for seriously. Thank you both for everything you're doing, really, to keep this experience that you both described so passionately and so eloquently available to the rest of us.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.